Are AI images banned on Etsy? There's a new AI advertising law out of New York that Etsy sellers are already starting to talk about, especially sellers who use AI-generated mockups, AI models, AI lifestyle photos, and AI backgrounds in their listings. And before we get dramatic, because I know the internet loves to take one legal update and turn it into everybody's getting sued tomorrow, we need to talk about what this law actually says, what it does not say, and what Etsy sellers should probably start doing now. Because this is one of those topics where truth is a little more boring than the panic posts, but it's still important, and there's a lot that you need to know before June 9th. For those who are new here, my name is Starla Moore, founder of the Handmade Alpha Academy for Etsy sellers and manager at erank.com, Etsy's most popular SEO tool. And just to make sure that you're not about to waste a whole lot of time watching this video just so you can comment and say exactly what I'm about to cover, I'm throwing out the disclaimer now. This law does not mean that every single AI-generated image on the internet is suddenly illegal, and it does not mean AI mockups are banned. But it does mean that if you are using a realistic AI-generated human in advertising, especially a person modeling, holding, wearing, or demonstrating a product, then you need to pay attention. Because even if you don't personally live in New York, this still applies to you. Oh, and as always, I'm not a lawyer, so take this as Starla's overview and not legal advice. On December 11th, 2025, a legislation was signed which requires people who produce or create advertisements to identify when those advertisements include AI-generated synthetic performers. In their words. New York's own announcement describes synthetic performers as digitally created media that appear to be real people. And it specifically says that they are sometimes used by advertisers to sell products across social media and digital advertising. The law takes effect 180 days after it became law, which puts the effective date at June 9th, 2026. And the scary part? The bill summary also lists penalties of $1,000 for a first violation and $5,000 for subsequent violations, which is why sellers are freaking out, because a lot of us are just now hearing about this, myself included. Under the bill's text, a synthetic performer is a digitally created asset that is created, reproduced, or modified by computer using generative AI or a software algorithm, and is intended to create the impression that the asset is engaging in an audiovisual or visual performance of a human performer who is not recognizable as any identifiable natural performer. Translation for normal humans? If your product photo includes a realistic AI-generated person who looks like a real human being but is not actually identifiable as a person, that may be what this law is talking about. So if you have an AI-generated model wearing your sweatshirt, an AI-generated woman holding your mug, an AI-generated person showing off your jewelry, or a fake AI family sitting in a fake AI living room with your products in the shot, this may apply to you under this law. Now, this law is not written as all AI images must be labeled. It focuses on synthetic performers that appear human, not every AI-generated background, every edited product photo, or every AI design. So an AI-generated floral background behind your candle, that may raise separate honesty or product representation issues, but that's probably not what this specific New York law is targeting. And based on my research, this is what a lot of coaches are getting wrong right now when talking about this law. Now, as I mentioned previously, this is a New York law, but that does not mean it only matters if your shop is based in New York. The bill applies to advertisements distributed in New York or to New York audiences. And obviously, when you sell on Etsy, your listings are generally visible to buyers in many states unless you have specifically limited where you sell or ship. If your listings images, Etsy ads, Pinterest pins, Instagram posts, Facebook ads, or email campaigns are visible to or targeting New York consumers, this applies to you. And this is especially important because Etsy's own seller policies say that sellers are responsible for complying with all applicable laws and regulations for the products that they list, including required labels and warnings, and Etsy says it does not assume responsibility for the accuracy, labeling, or content of seller listings. In other words, do not assume that Etsy will fix this for you, because they won't. The law says the advertisement must conspicuously disclose that a synthetic performer is in the advertisement, but it does not specify the exact wording, size, placement, font, or format of that disclosure. A little annoying that the law tells you what outcome it wants, but not exactly how to comply. However, this isn't entirely new because the FTC has long used the standard of clear and conspicuous in advertising. Under the FTC's endorsement guides, a clear and conspicuous disclosure is difficult to miss and easily understandable by ordinary consumers. For visual content, the disclosure should appear visually, stand out by size, contrast, location, and duration, and in interactive media like social media or the internet, it should be unavoidable, which gives us a little more practical direction. For Etsy sellers, the safer approach is not hiding AI used at the bottom of a listing description where no one sees it until after clicking. The safer approach is putting the disclosure where the buyer sees the image, such as AI-generated model shown. And to be safe, I would also avoid vague labels like AI-assisted by itself, because that doesn't tell the buyer what part of the image is AI. When it comes to legal terms, specificity matters. Now let's take a moment to separate legal compliance from Etsy compliance, because those are two different things. Etsy's own listing image requirements say that sellers must use original photos of the actual product that buyers will receive, not renderings or stock photos, except in specific situations. Etsy also says photos should accurately portray the condition, quality, and quantity of the item. Now, there are exceptions. For example, Etsy allows stock photo mockups in some production partner situations, such as when a seller creates an original design that a production partner prints onto a base item like a shirt or a mug, aka POD items. And per Etsy's rules, they also allow seller-prompted AI creations as items for sale, as long as they are based on the seller's original prompts, but sellers must disclose in the listing description if an item is created with the use of AI. But all of that is about the item being sold. The New York law is about advertising that includes an AI person. If you sell AI-generated wall art, Etsy already expects that to be disclosed in the listing description. If you sell a handmade necklace but use an AI-generated model wearing it in your listing images, the product may not be AI-generated, but your advertisement may contain what they consider a synthetic performer. While we're on this topic, there's another New York-related piece sellers should know about, especially if they work with models, photographers, mock-up creators, or agencies. New York's Fashion Workers Act also includes protections around models' digital replica. The New York Department of Labor says models must provide separate and explicit written consent regarding the use of their digital replica by model management companies and clients. The law itself requires clear written consent from the model for any creation or use of a model's digital replica, including the scope, purpose, rate of pay, and duration of use. For the average Etsy seller, this probably matters most when you're using photos of a real person and then using AI to alter, clone, extend, reuse, or generate new versions of that person. So if you hire a real model for a product shoot, do not assume that paying for one photo shoot gives you the right to feed their face and body into an AI tool and generate endless new mock-ups forever. That needs to be handled in writing, as it should. So will Etsy add a dedicated disclosure field for AI-generated models? Who knows? Will Etsy start requiring watermarks or labels on mockups? No idea. Will New York issue more detailed enforcement guidance before the law takes effect? Hopefully, but again, no one knows. But here's what we do know. Laws like this often push platforms and sellers towards clearer disclosure standards, even before every tiny detail is tested in court. And legal commentators are already saying that businesses advertising in New York should review their practices, including third-party created ads, to make sure that they can comply with the new disclosure requirements. And for Etsy sellers, this is one of those situations where waiting until enforcement starts is probably not the smartest plan, because the easiest time to fix your image workflow is before you have 400 listings, 27 Pinterest pins per listing, and images posted on every single social media platform. When it comes to AI and listing photos, this isn't just about legal compliance, it's about buyer trust. Etsy's been very clear in its policies that the marketplace is built on trust and transparency, and that listing images should help buyers understand what they're actually receiving. And when shoppers see a product on a person, in a room, on a body, in a hand, or in a lifestyle setting, they use that image to make assumptions. They assume the scale, the fit, the texture, the color, and they assume that the product actually exists in that photographed environment. So if the image is AI, especially if a human is being used to make the product feel more real, the buyer deserves to know what they're looking at. which is much better than a buyer receiving the item and thinking, wait, this doesn't look like the photo. That's how you get bad reviews, cases, returns, and potentially a lower search ranking. Nobody wants that. New York's new law does not ban AI images, nor does it apply to every AI-generated background or every AI-assisted edit. But it does require conspicuous disclosure when advertisements use AI-generated humans, and the practical impact could reach sellers outside New York if their advertising is distributed to New York consumers. For Etsy sellers, the smartest move is to start being clear about disclosure rather than hiding it. And honestly, that is probably where e-commerce is heading anyway. For more about my take on AI usage and transparency on Etsy, feel free to watch this video up here where I do a deep dive. And as always, guys, I try to keep you informed here on my channel because ultimately, teaching is what I've been doing my entire life, from preschools to colleges, and for nearly a decade in my own online classroom, allowing me to serve small business owners like you all across the world. The Handmade Alpha Academy is my 9-module training program that teaches sellers how to build, market, and grow dominant brands on Etsy step by step. In the Handmade Alpha Academy, we focus on defining your ideal target customer and effectively targeting them through proven psychological triggers. In fact, we're currently the only Etsy course in the world built on a foundation of neuromarketing, which is why we have over 2,000 students, many of whom run their businesses full-time. Not to mention, I give you tons of incentives to ensure that you have everything that you need to start your journey, including 1 year of eRank Pro for your SEO research, annual access to our Alpha Holiday Bootcamp to game up for Q4 each year, and my favorite, the Product Photography Essentials Workshop by expert photography coach Christina Nicole. And hey, I know that taking a leap of faith is hard. This industry is full of sketchy coaches and false promises, which is exactly why HAA includes a 30-day, zero questions asked money-back guarantee. If you get inside and don't absolutely love the program, we'll refund you in full. Limited registration only takes place from June 14th through June 24th, so if this sounds like something that you may be interested in checking out, be sure to visit the link right here somewhere or down below to check out our success stories in the class curriculum. Until next time, Pookie.